Good evening, everyone. So I know that this is a Karma Yoga class normally given by Swami Vivekananda. He is in flight, actually, at this very moment, possibly landing at LAX as we speak. And so he's not here, so I am your substitute teacher to abuse and reckon with for the evening. And we're going to stick with the subject tonight, Karma Yoga, but instead of kind of diverting his talk and his discussions about his text, I thought that we would take a little bit of a side trip, an adventure as it were, into the Katha Upanishad to see what it says about Karma Yoga in a grand scale of things. There's a lot of beautiful information and situations in here and a depth of inspiration to take us to a beautiful place. And so I want to share that with you as we go tonight. And to start, of course, it's my own personal tradition to start with a poem or from one of the great mystical poets. And tonight it's Hafiz, which will not be a surprise to many. And this one is to leave the familiar for a while. And it goes like this. It's an invitation for us, actually. Leave the familiar for a while. Let your senses and bodies stretch out like a welcomed season onto the meadows and shores and hills. Open up to the roof. Make a new watermark on your excitement and love. Like a blooming night flower, bestow your vital fragrance of happiness and giving upon our intimate assembly. Change rooms in your mind for a day. All the hemispheres in existence lie beside an equator in your heart. Greet yourself in your 1,000 other forms as you mount the hidden tide and travel back home. All the hemispheres in heaven are sitting around a fire, chatting, while stitching themselves together into a great circle inside of you. So that's our invitation there. This beautiful idea of bestowing your vital fragrance of happiness and giving upon this intimate assembly. As we gather, good evening. So we're going to go through the first section of the Katha Upanishad tonight, the story of Nachiketas, the son of Vajrasravasa, and learn from his simple understanding, his deep and yet faithful understanding of reality. So we're just going to read through here and pull out some wonderful ideas that are extremely helpful in putting together a practice of Karma Yoga, of deepening a practice of Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga, of course, is the path of action. So it's the idea of inhabiting the moment purely, so that the things that you do don't have a motive coming from the past, a cause, nor do they have a motive coming from the future, the fulfillment of a desire. They're done actually in the moment, simply as they are, for their own sake, as an offering to the true self, an offering to the divine, an offering to your own beloved. And it's a way of keeping the mind present, of being here in the I am, in the presence of God. Vajrasravasa, desiring reward, performed the Visvajit sacrifice in which he gave away all his property. He had a son named Nachiketa. When the gifts were being distributed, faith entered into the heart of Nachiketa, who was still a boy. He said to himself, "Joyless, surely, are the worlds to which he goes who gives away cows no longer able to drink, no longer able to eat or to give milk or to calve." He said to his father, "To whom will you give me?" He said this a second and a third time, and his father replied, "Unto death I will give you." That's a wonderful little scene here. Now, it's interesting. There's several ways that we can talk about this. I'm going to talk about a little bit of an alternative way of seeing it. tonight, because it says here that Nachiketas' father had this sacrifice, and he gave away everything, all of his property, gave everything away. And then Nachiketas, his son, is criticizing it. Well, what is this sacrifice, of cows that are too old to calve and can hardly eat and drink anymore and walk about? And as I read that for the first time, I thought, what are you doing, Nachiketas? It's your dad, first of all. How can you be critical of your father in his sacrifice? And second of all, he's giving everything he has, it says there in verse 1. So if that's what he had to give, that's what he had to give. And so I started pondering that and thinking, what is Nachiketas actually saying here? Is it that the common idea that his father wasn't giving the best of what he had? I wrestled with that because my understanding was that he gave everything. And so the heart kind of settled upon this idea that Nachiketas, we'll see, is not an ordinary young man. He has an incredible sense of discernment, an incredibly deep faith and understanding. And so he's sitting there looking at this sacrifice of what his father is doing and realizing, what do we have to give? What is it that you think that you can sacrifice for God? What is it that you think you own that you can give to someone else or to something else? And so Nachiketas is giving us the substrate from which true karma yoga can happen. The understanding, one, that you're not the doer, that God alone is the doer. You are this witness, the watcher of all of these things. That you're born into a world that you cannot take anything from. And Nachiketas is pointing out, you can also give nothing in this world of your own, because you come empty-handed and own nothing, and all that you get is a gift to you from life itself, which you also were not a participant in providing for yourself. And so he's saying, in this sacrifice that you come before the Lord with this idea, I'm going to be spiritual, I'm going to realize God, I'm going to know something, I'm going to be something, I'm going to do something. Nachiketas is pointing out, your cows can't calve. Your cows can't eat or drink. You have nothing. You don't have anything to give, and you can't take anything from. And so that alleviates that whole idea of work being as a means to an end. It takes away that idea that I'm going to give something in order to get something. And it resets the scale to zero and puts you profoundly in this moment at the 0 point, ahead of all the negative numbers behind you and before all the positive numbers seemingly in front of you. And so to understand that in your humility, as you approach this divine exercise, to know, indeed, you have nothing, you are nothing, except what has been given to you, what has been gifted to you from your beloved, from the divine herself. So he said to his father, Father, to whom will you give me? He said this a second and a third time. Then his father replied, Unto death I will give you. Among many I am the first, Nachiketas thinks, or among many I am the middlemost, but certainly I'm never the last. What purpose of the king of death will my father serve today by thus giving me away to him? So you see, it's interesting because Nachiketas is being sent to death from his father. And we think, oh my God, his father just condemned him to death. Well, that's a ridiculous idea. Which one of us is not condemned to death? Which one of us, given life by our parents, were not simultaneously given death by our parents? And so it's just an equalization once again, bringing us again to that 0 point, of having nothing, doing nothing, being nothing in an impossible situation. And he's wondering, well, what is this about? What is this? What is death going to do with me? What is life going to do with me? What am I going to do with me? Who am I? Where do I fit in the scale of things? He's beginning to discern and saying, well, I'm not the least of things. I'm certainly not the best. I'm pretty much like most people. I'm right here in the center. So he's wondering about what is my worth? What is my value? And so Nachiketas says, look back and see how it was with those who came before us, and observe how it is with those who are now with us. A mortal ripens like corn, and like corn he springs up again. So Nachiketas is inviting all of us, become aware of your true situation in this world. Look carefully at the things that you've done in the past. Have they produced anything for you? What do you have remaining of them? How long will it last? He's inviting you to be very honest about life, to look at the fact that you are here for a very short time. That becomes more and more apparent as you grow old. You know, I remember when you were young, when you're 5 years seems like a whole lifetime, because it is when you're 5. So, you know, that percentage-wise, you think 5 years, wow, that's a lifetime, it's a long time. And so when someone says, oh, you don't get to graduate from high school until you're 18, you're like, oh my gosh, 18, that's like 13 years. 13 years, that's like 2 lifetimes away. You know, so life seems so long, and yet when you get older, you know, and you push that middle age, and you start realizing 5 years now is 1/10 of a life. You're like, oh, that's nothing. It's hardly any time at all. So life keeps accelerating and making it more and more apparent to us that this is a temporary existence. It's a temporary existence from which we can take nothing and to which we can give nothing. We are the observer. We are the witness of this divine play of the beloved, the mother. So he says, look back and see how it was with those who came before us, and observe how it is for those who are now with us. A mortal ripens like corn, and like corn he springs up again. Verily, like fire, a Brahmin guest enters a house. The householder pacifies him by giving him water and a seat. Bring him water, O king of death. Because see, now Nachiketas has been sent to death, and he's sitting in death's waiting room. Right? And he's been there, we're going to find out in the next verse, he's been there for 3 days. And death has not welcomed him. Death wasn't there, actually. So Nachiketas is just sitting there and waiting for death to happen. And once again, where is that? Where is he waiting? Where are you waiting? You're waiting right here, right now for death. And death hasn't come yet, hasn't offered you your water. But it's your time to sit and discern. What is this life about? Who am I? What do I have to give? What have I taken? What is the value of this existence? You know, as you sit there and contemplate these things and wait for death to arrive. So death arrives, and he says, "O Brahmin, salutations to you. You are a venerable guest and have dwelt in my house 3 nights without eating. Therefore choose 3 boons, 1 for each night, O Brahmin. May all be well with me." Because in the culture in which this scripture was from, to have a guest come to your house and not be shown hospitality, especially a Brahmin, the bearer of the scriptures, the preserver of truth, you know, that this caste that was given the responsibility of bringing these teachings through thousands of years to you and me tonight, that this young boy, who no doubt at that point was studying and memorizing his family's section of the Vedas in order to propagate them and share them with his children, who will then pass them to the next generation and the next generation. He's sitting in death's waiting room and not getting any attention. So death has said, okay, I'm in my sorrow for having done that. My apology is to give you 3 boons. So Nachiketas says, O death, may Gautama, my father, be calm, cheerful, and free from anger toward me. May he recognize me and greet me when I shall have been sent home by you. This I choose as the first of my 3 boons. This is a very clever boon, very clever response, because he wants several things. 1, he knows he's in the company of death. And so in his first boon, he's saying, okay, don't take me, don't kill me, and don't kill me and give me rebirth in a form that my dad's not going to recognize, and don't send me back to my angry father, whose sacrifice I questioned, whom I provoked to send me to you. So he's asking, that same, what is it, Ramakrishna tells that story about the guy that says, I want to eat off of golden plates with my grandchildren as his boon, meaning that he'll be rich, that he's going to have grandchildren, and that he's going to live long enough to see them all. So it's that clever response. So Nachiketas starts off with that, basically saying, okay, I don't want to die. That's my first boon. And I want to be able to go home, and I want everything to be fine when I get there. So that's his first boon. Rather harmless and straightforward. But it shows you, it gives you an opportunity to see what are the things that are important to you in your life. If you were going to go right now, what is it that you're worried about? Often when I think about that, about if I were to die or if I'm ready to die, of course, the first thing in my mind, I have to confess, is my mother. Oh my God, what would how would she, oh no, I can't go now. That would just be so horrible for her to go through. So you see, Nachiketas is sharing our own humanity. His first thought is his parents. I don't want to go. And he doesn't want to go with his parents angry at him. So he's showing us that this story is not so far away from us. It's not so unreal, that here we sit in the waiting room of death, waiting for our visit with Yama, leaving this world behind, and in our time here contemplating and looking through our lives to see what we can learn about what we've experienced, looking around at others and learning from their examples, reading through the scriptures, trying to find out what is the point of all of this life. So he gets his second boon. Nachiketas said, in the heavenly world there is no fear whatsoever. You, O death, are not there, and no one is afraid of old age, leaving behind both hunger and thirst, and out of the reach of sorrow, all rejoice in heaven. You know, O death, the fire sacrifice, which leads to heaven. Explain it to me, for I am full of faith. The inhabitants of heaven attain immortality. This I ask as my second boon. So we see the things that lead Nachiketas to want to know. It's the things that lead us to spiritual life, the things that lead us to religion or to contemplation or to spiritual practice. We want to escape fear. Vivekananda says that the first thing that happened when we thought God was other than us, fear was born. As soon as we broke that vital unity, that one without a second, as soon as we identified a self that had a will separate and apart from God, naturally the first thing that happened was fear. You see that in the Garden of Eden. When Adam and Eve first partake of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, when they gave birth to their sense of ego, to their sense of separateness, the first thing that they did when they heard that God walking in the cool of the eve in the garden, they ran in fear. It's always amazing to me. They ran in fear from the God of love. That's what happens when you develop ego, when you develop separation. You fear that which loves you most, the divine. God becomes this tyrant, this opposition to your ego, and that fear is born. And so he wants to escape this fear. He says, there is no fear of you, death. There's no fear of anything. There's no old age. There's no hunger. There's no thirst. So he's talking about these reoccurring constant states of need that this world brings to us. How do we live in this world when we're constantly hungry, constantly tired? One of the chores I was given when I was 10 years old was to make my bed in the morning. And I tell you, for a good 10 years, I wondered, why in the world do I have to make my bed every morning? I just get in it again and, another 10 hours from now, and it's all messy again. Why can't I just leave it messy? So this is our state. We live in a world where we're constantly going in circles. We're not accomplishing anything. That money that you go and earn in a day, it's not in a linear thing that it's going somewhere. It's providing for your loops. It's providing for your rent every month. It's providing your breakfast, your lunch, and your dinner. It's providing your house. It's providing your car to go to work and back to work, back to home, out on vacation. back to home. Round and round and round and round, everything goes. So he's wanting to know, how do we break this cycle of constant need? How do we break this cycle of constant hunger? How do we touch something of fearlessness, of eternity? You know, O death, what is this fire sacrifice which leads to heaven, to this state of freedom, this state of fulfillment? Yama says to him, I know well the fire sacrifice which leads to heaven, and I will explain it to you. Listen to me. Know this fire to be the means of attaining heaven. It is the support of the universe. And this sentence here, this is one of my favorites. It's bold, underlined, bigger text. He says, this fire, it is hidden in the hearts of the wise. So this sacrifice that Nachiketas is looking for, this fire which will lead us to this freedom, Yama is saying, I know it well. I know this fire, and it's in the heart of the wise. It lies deep within you. Where? According to the Rig Veda, you are that temple of the divine. Within you lies this altar. Within you lies this fire sacrifice. Yama then told him about the fire, which is the source of the worlds, and what bricks were to be gathered for the altar, and how many, and how the sacrificial fire was to be lighted. Nachiketas too repeated all of this as it had been told him. Then Yama, being pleased with him, spoke again. Now, when I read this for the first time, this Katha Upanishad, Nachiketas is asking for this sacrifice that's going to lead me to freedom. And so I thought for sure the rest of this Upanishad was going to be about how to do this sacrifice that was going to give me, the jewel divine. I mean, the biggest prize of all, this freedom. That one verse right there is all that Yama says. He's like, yeah, I told him about the bricks, and I told him about this, and I told him about that. And then he moves on, and I'm like, where are the instructions? Where is this? And so Yama says, he tells him about the fire, the source of the worlds, and what bricks were to be gathered for the altar. High-souled Death, being well pleased, said to Nachiketas, I will now give you another boon. And this boon is even a greater hint to us. This fire shall be named after you. Take also from me this many-colored chain. So this very interesting thing, this idea, first of all, that this fire is hidden within the hearts of the wise, and this fire bears your name. This fire is this life. This fire, this sacrifice is you, and it's to be made within the temple of the heart. This fire burns in the cave of the heart. It is the inner shrine upon which you place the offerings through your senses. Its smoke is the sum total of your prayers. You are this sacrifice, and everything that you bring into this temple that comes in through your ears, your nose, your eyes, your senses, those are your offerings to the beloved. And the smoke is what action it causes in you, what thoughts it causes in you, what desires it causes in you. And those are your prayers. Every action that you make in a day is your prayer to the divine. Everything that you think is a prayer to your beloved. Everything that you do is going to your beloved as a request. In Thessalonians, there's a wonderful verse, chapter 5, verse 17, where the practitioner is instructed to pray without ceasing. And of course, in that book, The Way of the Pilgrim, that young pilgrim is running around asking everybody, what does this mean? What does this mean? What does this mean? And I think that talking to Yama here with Nachiketas, we see what this means. That this is to understand you are, in fact, praying without ceasing all the time. But you're completely unaware of your prayer. Completely unaware of how that People magazine is turning into a prayer as it goes into your eyes, through your mind, and then out through your actions to your beloved. Life is a prayer, and this moment here tonight is the sum total of those prayers. Because God never says no, never has to. He always says yes, gives you everything that you ask for. And you're like, well, wait a minute, there's no Ferrari in the parking lot. I don't have the house up on the hill there. What do you mean he gives me everything I ask for? Well, you see, he adds them all together and gives you the sum total of everything that you've asked for. So you might have been asking for fame and fortune, but then you slept through the audition, decided not to go because you'd rather sleep that morning. So he heard that prayer, your prayer for a better night's sleep, and he put that together with your muttering something about fame and fortune, and he gave you the average of the two. And so here you are. Your life is the average of all of your prayers. And to pray without ceasing is really a command to become aware of your prayers. Live in this moment in full consciousness to understand the import of everything that's occurring in it. Search through your heart and wake it up. Come out of this reverie of unconsciousness, this reverie of distraction that your pleasures bring you, this forgetfulness that your senses bring you, this intoxication that your senses make you dull with, so that you can't see your prayer, let alone control your prayer, let alone ask for the things deep within the heart for you. In the Complete Works, in Volume 5, Vivekananda is asked, what is the efficacy of prayer? And he answers, by prayer, one's subtle powers are easily roused, and if consciously done, all desires may be fulfilled by it. But done unconsciously, 1 perhaps in 10 is fulfilled. Such prayer, however, is selfish and should therefore be discarded. So this notion of coming to this moment, being conscious about your prayer and offering it, Vivekananda is saying, yes, all of your desires could be fulfilled by that means. To become fully aware of the moment, fully aware of your actions, fully aware of the prayer that your life is emanating at this moment in its constant form. But then he gives you one more very important piece to your karma yoga. Don't be selfish. Don't imagine a desire. There's nothing here for you. Learn that from the first part of Nachiketas' investigation. Look around you. Who has taken anything from this world when they go? And who has brought anything to this world when they came? It's a zero-sum game. There's nothing here for you. There's nothing to get, nothing to have, nothing to hold. All of that lies within the temple and the shrine of your heart, where all of this world is born, where all of this universe manifests. This world in reality is within you. You are not within it. Work accordingly. Be present. See the divine. Enjoy the isness. And in isness, there is no future to fulfill, no past to pay for. There's only freedom. Isness is your freedom, the I am, this moment. Nachiketas says, there is this doubt about a man when he is dead. Some say that he exists, others says that he does not. This I should like to know, taught by you. This is the third of my boons. This is one of my favorite ideas, because one of the first things you hear when you come to the Vedanta is that you've never been born and you're never going to die. And so the first question you always ask, the devotee always asks, what happens when I die? It's like we're told on the one hand, you're never going to die. And then we're all completely filled with this idea of what happens when I die? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? And we've got all these, there's books and books and books and books and books from all the different religions to try and quell that question or try to answer that question. But it's interesting. If that question had an answer, I'm sure that Yama would just give him the answer. But it's very complex. And Yama says this. Yama says, on this subject, even the gods formerly had their doubts. It is not easy to understand. The nature of Atman is subtle. Choose another boon, O Nachiketas. Do not press me. Release me from that boon. So it's a question that really doesn't make sense outside of the dream. You know? If you in your dream body, you know, there's a bus coming right at you. You're in the dream, the bus is just about to hit you, and you're like, oh my God, what's going to happen to me? And you ask somebody, what's going to happen to me when this bus hits me? Well, probably very much like Yama, the person's going to be like, well, that's a very complex question because you're not really here, and that's not really a bus, and it's not really going to hit you. Yes, you can see it. Yes, you're probably going to feel it. Yes, something is going to occur. But this truth of the Atman is quite subtle. It's quite difficult to understand. I can't explain to you in this dream that you believe that it's unreal and that it is actually within you, that this dream is happening within you, that you're not this person in the dream, that the dream is actually in you. I can't really explain that to you in a meaningful way because it's counter to everything you think you know. The sum total of your mental knowledge will counter the truth at every point because that knowledge was collected from an imagined perspective, an imagined point of view. This world is like that, the sages say. So if you're in the dream and you're working with the unreal in the unreal, how do you do that and still have meaning? How do you do that and still have inspiration? How do you do that and not immediately go and try some form of suicide to break out of the monotony, the meaninglessness of the material? Because that, you know, the scriptures, the Bible says the wages of sin is death. And I always thought to myself, well, everybody dies. Does that mean that's kind of a moot point at that point? Why even say that? But there's a very good reason to say that. Because, see, only those who believe themselves to be the body are going to suffer death. Because they're going to go through that whole experience believing that I am dying. I am dying. It's over for me. My life is finished. And they will suffer that fear, that anxiety, that terror of the unknown. You know, Sri Nachiketas says the difference between a sage and a sinner, when they die, the sage leaves this world laughing. The worldly man leaves this world crying. You're thinking that you're leaving something behind. It's like knowing that the dream is over, and so you start weeping for something that was never real, that never gave you anything. That was a zero-sum game. But the man of freedom, who knows that the dream is within them, knows that the passing from the dream to this other reality, it's just a rebirthing, in a sense. It's just a new experience. Like Sri Ramakrishna says, it's taking the pillowcase off, you know, putting another one on if you want, or just staying a naked pillow if you're smart. So this notion, giving meaning to the dream, is to be fully in the dream, but fully aware of your prayer in the dream, which means to be fully aware of the situation, what you are, who you are, what's happening here. That the dream is a manifestation, but it's a manifestation of the profound, a manifestation of the beautiful, and therein lies the meaning for your cubicle job, for your bus driving job, for all of the circles that you complete in your life. as one revolution after another happens. The meaning lies in who you are and what is manifesting through this. Pure love, pure intelligence, pure existence that has no limit, whose depth can never be reached. You will be falling in love forever. Yama says to him, choose sons and grandsons who shall live 100 years. Choose elephants, horses, herds of cattle and gold. Choose a vast domain on earth. Live here as many years as you desire. If you deem any other boon equal to that, choose it. Choose wealth. Choose a long life. Be the king, O Nachiketas, of this big wide world. I will make you the enjoyer of all desires. Whatever desires are difficult to satisfy in this world of mortals, choose them as you wish. These fair maidens with their chariots and musical instruments, men cannot obtain them. I will give them to you, and they shall wait upon you. But do not ask me about death. So you see, this is a very interesting time right here, because Nachiketas has come, he's pressing for his answer. He wants to know. And something, if you read the lives of the avatars when they come, they seem to go through this exact test, as it were. Jesus had to be taken out to the desert for 40 days, and there Satan takes him to the top of the mountain and says, I will give you all of this if you just let go of your quest. Let go of what you want. Takes him to another mountain and shows him all this. Throw yourself down. If you throw yourself down, the Lord will catch you. You are his son, right? And then Buddha with Mara sitting there, and all of the beautiful nymphs dancing in front of him, offering themselves to him. And he stood there, no, I want the truth. I want to know what is. I don't want any more dreaming. I don't want any more pretense. I want what is real. And Ramakrishna, as he sat there in that deep meditation, feeling the joints lock up like chains, and being offered all of these enjoyments, and as he turns, he finds this black, hideous thing exit him, which turned out to be his weakness or his sinful self, his ego self, that causes all of this trouble. So here it's all being offered to him, and this is something very poignant for us to remember. You are in death's waiting room. And by the fact that you're in this room or watching this internet show tonight, you're asking of death, what is the meaning? What is life? What is important? And no doubt, the nymphs of heaven will dance before you tomorrow. Desires will flash in and out of line all day for you tomorrow. Ideas of what you lack and what you need. Reminders of your hungers and your thirsts. Will you stand there, firmly entrenched on your desire to know the truth? Or will you take what's behind door number 2? Will you take what's behind door number 3 in exchange? Seems like a great deal. That seems like a great opportunity. Wow, really? I can have that? That's amazing. Sure, let's do that instead. Never mind. You can keep the third boon. But listen to this. Nachiketas says, O death, these endure only until tomorrow. Furthermore, they exhaust the vigor of all the sense organs. Even the longest life is short indeed. Keep your horses. Keep your dances. Keep your songs for yourself. So he's giving us a marvelous foundation for discernment. All of these things only last until tomorrow. This world evaporates. Nothing lasts. I get to my favorite point. The only thing you can keep in this world is potting soil. Yes.
So, Swami, the conversation, is it like a conversation between our desire self or the self that wants us to desire more? The dream is always that if I pursue that desire, it will give me long-lasting happiness. But in reality, it's just going to last for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Nachiketas is like say to that desire.
Yeah.
It's like he's discerning with Yama.
Exactly. Well, he is discerning with Yama, but it's not happening in real time. He's been discerning through the whole process, even from the very beginning, even when he was looking at his father's sacrifice and saying, what is it that we have to sacrifice? Everything we have to sacrifice is imperfect. It's all caught in the cycle of hunger and thirst. It's all growing old and dying. You know, even if I sacrifice a brilliant horse, that brilliant, great horse is only great for 1, 2, 3 years, and then it's an old nag. You know, it's no good anymore. So there is no good sacrifice. There is nothing that we can give. So he's been going through this discernment from the beginning, so that when this final test comes, when the sum of his desires are being offered to him, he's standing on the fruit of that discernment. He's standing in the faith of that knowledge. And he's saying to death, everything you've offered me is good until tomorrow morning, and then it's gone. He said, even the longest life is short on the last day. There is no such thing as a long life. A life that has a measure is no life. It's immortality or nothing. So he knows this, and he's reminding himself of it, and he's standing firm. He's like, no, I want to know truth. I want to know love in its purest form. I want to know my nature. And I don't want any of these other things. They endure only till tomorrow. They exhaust the vigor of the sense organs. Yeah. Let me pick on the rock and roll stars, you know. in their youth, you know, when you're in high school, they're your gods. They're beautiful, they're amazing, they're sexy, they're flashy, they're everything you want to be. And then when you get to be my age and you look at the rock stars that you idolized in high school, and you see what that life has done to them, you see how it has taken the vigor out of their senses. You see the age written on that face and on that body, the exhaustion. And to think about that, I often thought about what it would be like, you know, to be this rock star with all of that attention and all of that glory and all of that fame, and then to be old. Watch yourself begin to grow old, and you begin losing all of the things that your fame depended on. You start losing all of the things that gave you the money that you've been burning at both ends for your whole life. And can you imagine that fear, that contraction that would happen in that, if you were not a person of discernment, if you had not been able to look beyond, to learn as Nachiketas is learning, to see as Nachiketas is seeing, that all of these things in their place are meaningless. They can't stay with you. They can't give to you, because there is an unsurmountable chasm between the mere material and the spirit, the self and its manifestation. You can only watch. You're the witness. That's what the scriptures mean by that. You are a witness. You're not even a participant. Just like your dream goes on at night. There's nothing happening there, nothing being accomplished there. It's all you. There is no mystery, you know. All the mystery is pretense in that dream. Wealth can never make a man happy. Moreover, since I have beheld you, I shall certainly obtain wealth. I shall also live as long as you rule. Therefore, no boon will be accepted by me, but the one that I have asked. That is our determination. That is what it takes to realize the divine, to know your nature, to stand in this life at this moment and say, I am ever free, I am ever pure, I am ever beloved of the divine. I will not turn my eyes from my beloved. I will not give up my quest. I will not weaken my resolve. I will not stop until I know, until I have realized the truth of my own existence. To have that firmness, to have that commitment, this is what it takes, because God never says no to a prayer. But pray a conscious prayer. Pray a prayer that you're aware of, that really speaks from the heart, not from a feeling, not from a body, not from a hunger, not from a thirst, but speaks from the very soul, the voice of your own internal nature. Wealth can never make a man happy. No boon will be accepted by me but the one that I have asked. Who among decaying mortals here below have approached the undecaying immortals, and coming to know that his higher needs may be fulfilled by them, would exult in a life overlong, after he had pondered on the pleasures arising from beauty and song? Tell me, O death, of the great hereafter, about which a man has his doubts. So he's saying, who, death, is going to want all of these things after they've tasted immortality, after they've tasted fearlessness, after they've tasted divine love? Who's going to want any of this? When they see its nature, when they come back to their favorite building and find it collapsed, when they come back to their Ferrari and see it crushed in a junkyard, who is going to want these things when they know their nature, when they know the fact that they are crippled? This world cannot give you anything. There is nothing here to take. You are all of the beauty that you see. You are all of the inspiration that you feel. You are all of the love that you enjoy. You are that. Knowing that, what would you ever come back for? Except for another manifestation of your divinity, of that love. Tell me, O death, of that great hereafter, about which a man has doubts. So this is karma yoga. This is how it happens. To know the nature of things and to realize there is no point to it. There is no purpose to it aside from those which you assign to it. And that doesn't leave you empty, because it's a manifestation. It's the divinity unfolding. It's the nature of pure beauty. It's the nature of pure love. It's the nature of pure immortality. Watch it. Be amazed at all of its variance, all of the ways that it says, I love you. Everything that is done by every man, woman, child, beast in this world is done for love alone. Either that love is ignorant and is leading to things that go in circles, or that love is conscious and alive and leads home to freedom. But it's up to us, right? To stay in that discerning self. Don't give in to weakness. Don't give in to confusion. Don't give in to things that will not last.
So, Swami, say if someone is like for a long time in the circle of love that is like trapping him, right? And so, should I just continue coming to the class? Because for me, like the discernment that Nachiketas has, it hasn't come yet. So, is it okay to like continue for a long time in this circle? Still continuing the practice?
Yes, well, you're not going to have any choice. The circle's going to go on. Grace alone brings us home. Knowing that, be happy. Knowing that grace is yours, knowing that your enlightenment has been promised by Sri Ramakrishna, by Jesus, by Buddha. Know from their example that the way is out. And Ramakrishna says, you've been bit by the cobra. You haven't been bitten by a water snake. Your days are numbered. You know? He goes on to say, anybody who has come to this place, this is their last birth. And many people don't want to believe that. Many people will hem and haw around it. I choose to be like Nachiketas on that one. You promised, Thakur. You said this is it for me. I'm not going to worry myself with that not being true. This is it. I'm coming home. So be glad with that. You know, Saint John of the Cross does a beautiful thing. He says that your effort can only take you to the edge of the chasm. It cannot take you across it. You have to sit and wait for the divine to carry you across that final chasm. He says, so what do? He says, you tend your room, your shrine. You tend your shrine so that when your beloved comes, the betrothal chamber is in its perfect shape. It's the purest, cleanest, most beautiful, wonderful place to be, that you've decorated it longingly for all of these years so that when the beloved shows up to take you home, you have that bridal chamber. That's what we do, waiting for grace to manifest, waiting for it to show itself. You know, there's this wonderful thing that I think it's Vivekananda says about faith. I've read it before. It's one of my favorite things. Yeah, Vivekananda, a disciple of Vivekananda, writes about faith. Faith does not mean a sudden effervescence of sentimentalism or a dazzling display of intellectual feat. Faith has no concern with these passing shadows which vanish away before the tremendous facts of life, talking exactly about what Nachiketas was just trying to share. Faith has nothing to do with this ephemeral world, believing something for no reason. It's not locked up in this causation loop at all. Faith has no concern with these passing shadows which vanish away before the tremendous fact of life. It stands unmoved in the innermost depth of your heart as the one vital principle of all thought and action. In the midst of the varying destinies of earthly existence, it is the intuitive perception of an eternal relation with something which, by its overwhelming prominence, throws into shade the ever-vanishing shows of the world and draws us away from it, draws away from its diversified occupations to a close touch with that permanent reality. So it's that knowing of this eternal, this suspicion that you have within of this eternal relationship with an absolute existence, unchanging, fearless, ever free. It's where all of your ideals are born. In this world, there are no ideals. There is not one perfect anything. Where does our hunger and thirst for perfection come from? It is born of faith. It's this intuitive knowing that we are of an eternal relationship with something that, when it's seen, throws into shadow everything in this changing world and stands so bright and so beautiful that it draws us away from all of this diversified manifestation to bring us to a close touch, an intimate embrace with that one permanent, unchanging reality. That's karma yoga. Living and working because of that, through inspiration, not doing to get, not doing because of hunger, not doing because of thirst, not doing because of desire, but doing because of beauty, doing because of grace and mercy, doing because of love, because it's your very nature to be, to exist. Any other questions or concerns?
That is a long question, more like relative.
Sure.
Question. The world is made up of both good and bad. Sometimes when we see that the bad is doing just fine in the world, getting acceptance in society, instead of being condemned, which ideally should be the case. We question our principles, self-doubts creep in, and we hardly see any point in being good ourselves. How to hold to one's own principle in such moments of trial?
Well, there's a lot of ways to tackle that question. How do we hold on? Well, it's not a matter of holding on. You're going to be there, whether you're holding on to it or not. It's a matter of being true to, rather than holding on to. Being true to your nature. This world's made up of good and evil? No, it's not. This world is God alone. Things become good and evil based on your desires and your needs from the perspective of a body or from the perspective of a mind, but not from the perspective of the self, the soul. It's true that this world can be terrible to a body, no doubt about it. You're not the body. You never were. That body you picked up for your dream last night was just as real as the one you picked up for this life. So is there a big consequence about the things that happen to it? No, not really. Will it give you an idea that there's good and bad things in this world? Yes, it will. And the more you identify with it, the more you will believe that there's good and evil. It's the same with the mind. There are things in this world that are brutal to a mind. You are not the mind. You are ever free and ever pure and ever blissful. Is it a big consequence that some things are good for a mind and some things aren't? No, it's not. It's of no consequence at all. The mind itself creates the good and creates the evil. There's only isness. Both sides of the coin exist simultaneously. It's only an individuated perspective that can see one side or the other at a time. But the ever-present self sees all at the same time. It sees the perfect summation of perfect harmony, perfect balance, because it doesn't get drawn into the ignorance of the whole by overemphasizing the individual. That's what delusion is. Delusion is emphasizing our individual perspective as true. The idea of good and evil, the idea that I see this and can't see that, I want this, don't want that. All those things are based on those individual attributes which we've collected over the years, which sometimes were true and sometimes weren't true. You know, when I was 7, I hated peas, hated them. I sat at the dinner table one night for 2.5 hours because I refused to eat my peas. And actually, in the end, I never did. I actually snuck them into the laundry detergent bucket that was sitting down next to my chair. When I was in college, I was sitting there eating my peas, and I realized that. I was like, wow, the food I hated so bad when I was 7 has become one of my favorites. I love peas with salt and pepper on them. So what was this identity that I was willing to suffer for when I was 7, that when I was 20 didn't even exist for me? I would have called peas evil. I would have called my parents wicked and mean for making me eat them. And yet that wasn't an absolute truth. It was a relative truth. And so much of the truth of mind and much of the truth of body is relative. It will be true here, it won't be true there. But the one truth that we know is this unchanging reality within. This is what Vivekananda was trying to tell us. That we go through this life, we're constantly striving for an ideal, even though we can plainly see that no ideal ever manifests, except for a Jesus or a Buddha, but most of us don't get to see that at the time. But that these ideals don't exist in the manifest world. They belong to our inner nature. You know? And I repeat that thing again. That's How do we know these things that don't exist in the world? Where did we come up with the idea of immortality? Is there anything in this world of the senses that we run into that can teach us about immortality? Nothing. So how did we come up with that? Where is that? It can only be true if you brought it into the world with you, this notion of immortality, the notion of the infinite, those two things. There's nothing here that taught you infinity. Nothing. There is no such thing here. And yet you know it conceptually. Where did you get that from? You brought it with you. You brought it with you. And so it is with every one of your ideals: pure love, pure beauty, pure being, pure intelligence. Where did you learn any of those from? It's your own perfection that brought them to you. So this world is not a collection of good and evil. This world is God. Let go of your insistence on being separate and apart, and the duality slips away, they say. All right. We have time for one more if there is another, or general conversation. Yeah, Alex.
I don't really have an answer for this, but just in listening, you read this, and it was because of the your interweaving of scriptures generally. Because I was just thinking that this is, in a lot of ways, really like the inverse of the Isaac sacrifice story, and just just thinking about that is very good. Isaac is born because they're hospitable to guests, and sort of the food sort of comes at the beginning, and it's his life, and then he's going to be God very direct about sacrifice your son, the one you love, Isaac, and then the reverse order would be the sheep, and then one of the I think the other graph was sort of right after Isaac is saved, but like there's no explanation of what happens afterwards. Just all of a sudden everything is sort of magically all right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm almost thinking this would fit as this would be a more sensible ending. In fact, actually is, and then there's this other thing that I'm just thinking of how they're sort of inverse of each other.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Of course, that's a profound happening within the Christian world. The fact that Isaac was offered, on that God, it was Abraham's his father, right? Says, offer Isaac to me. And so God lets Abraham build that altar, and he ties up his son and puts him on that altar, and he's lifting the knife, as a sacrifice. And then God comes at the last minute, stops him, provides a ram that gets caught in the tree nearby, and says, you can offer the ram instead. And you think, wow, that's intense. There's a lot of negativity to that whole thing. Like, really, God? Like, really? Really? You let it go that far? It's hard to deal with. But then you think of the story in its entirety, because what did God do in response to that? According to the Christian's ideal, anyway, their scripture. He gave his son to us, and he didn't exchange it for a ram at the end. You see, that's the beauty of the sacrifice of Jesus within the Christian tradition, is that it wasn't our sacrificing Jesus. Jesus wasn't ours to sacrifice. His sacrifice was God sacrificing for you. God saying to you, I will do anything for you. I will do anything for us to be back together, for that union, for that one without a second. Anything. And that was a demonstration of it. So in one sense, you could see God was playfully, perhaps, this is just an interpretation, there's not necessarily truth. But what if Abraham had said no? Then maybe Jesus wouldn't have happened.
Especially, I think, growing up with Jewish, there's no Jesus making up for it.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, no, that's true.
And it is something that is really grappled with, and I think, generally and there's a version of it in the Islamic faith too, that's Ishmael.
Yeah.
And I've not read it. I've read there are versions where.
Well, they come from the same root. That's the odd thing. Judaism is the root of both Christianity and Islam. You know, the Old Testament. Was it Abraham? Boy, see, it's been so long since I was in seminary. All the names escape me, but Hagar and
Hagar is the Egyptian handmaid.
yeah, the handmaid. Was she the handmaid or was she the wife?
Sarah's the wife.
Sarah's the wife. Hagar's the handmaid. Yeah, and so God tells Abraham, "I'm going to give you a son." And he goes home, and Sarah says, "What? Look at how old I am. I'm not going to be able to give you a son. Here, take my handmaid. She'll give you a son." So Abraham takes the handmaid, and then the handmaid gives him a son, but then so does Sarah. And so, from what I understand, that's where the lineage splits. And for the Christians, they take the child of Sarah as being the blessed lineage, and that's where Jesus comes from. And Islam takes the other as the blessed lineage, and that's where Muhammad comes from. And so this play of the divine, it's quite intriguing, quite interesting. So, but it's all a play for the divine. All right, I'm going to read a poem here that I have tacked on at the end. I have learned so much from God that I can no longer call myself a Christian, a Hindu, a Muslim, a Buddhist, or a Jew. The truth has shared so much of itself with me that I can no longer call myself a man, a woman, an angel, or even a pure soul. Love has befriended Hafiz so completely. It has turned to ash and freed me of every concept, of every image my mind has ever known. Jai Ma, Jai Thakur, Jai Swamiji. May we know the truth.